We'll start with the Heart Sutra, page 8. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling on Masa Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata om gate gate padagate padasamgati bodhi soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagawan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. Now, Bhagawan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagawan. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis in the 3 chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanations, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamara Sashadara Samara Yakus. Akasamara Sashadara Samara Yaku. Tayata gate gate padagate padasamgate bodhi soha. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified, may they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. And then page 15 for the mandala offering. Sashi poi ki shui shin me tok Ramari Ravling Shi Ni Te Kyen Hari Sangye Shindu Nik Te O Ai Do Namadal Shin La Chu Pa Shu Jetsu Lama Dhamma Kinam Choku Kala Kien Se Chu Zin Chin Chita Zampe Lord Jesus Mala Sa Ye Chukyi Chapa Tu Solidam Guradna Mandala Kam Niriyatayam Sangye Churan Sokhi Chonam La Changchu Badu Dabni Kyabsuji Dagi Chinyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Panche Sangye Drupa Shu Sangye Churan Sokhi Chonam La Changchu Badu Dabni Kyabsuji Dagi Chinyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Panche Sangye Drupa Shu Sangye Chudon Sogi Chunamla Changchu Badu Dabni Kyabsuji Dagi Chinyen Gipe Sonamki Trola Penche Sangye Drupa Shu. So setting a most profound Mahayana motivation for engaging in listening, reflecting, contemplating this vast teaching of the Buddha, all encapsulated in the 12 links of dependent origination. So I mentioned last week this more contemporary depiction of the wheel of life, and I found the book on my shelf right there staring at me, Awakening from the Dream. So it has instead of Yama, it's like the skeleton, it's like death, and like the hungry ghost realm is all people at a sale in a store grabbing at everything, so that craving and grasping and so forth. The hell realms is just like this intense sound, arguing, aggression, that sort of mind. So it's quite interesting. The God realm, the jealous gods are all sort of posing and looking very, look at me, wanting to, quite competitive with each other. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting representation, and then you go, oh, but where's this, and where's that, and where's that, and where's that? So as the Buddha in this point, not the text, but pointing to the moon as that representation. So yeah, your way out of samsara. So it's quite an interesting. David Nickturn, it's a wisdom publication. So anyway, it has a sort of more contemporary feel in the way that it explains the wheel of life. And I think it's important that we look at different, you know, it sort of helps you look with fresh eyes or different ways to enrich our understanding of this whole presentation on dependent origination. So we got up to going through the different links of dependent arising. We got up to the final one last week, which is aging and death. And this is represented in our diagram as, I mean, that was one thing I looked at here and I thought, here it's a coffin. This one, ours is more accurate. It's a person carrying a corpse, right? So a live person carrying a corpse, and it's representing both of these, two in one, of aging and death. And the way we look at this is that, you know, when we talk about the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, aging comes straight after birth. And so this is straight after the 11th link. So this idea of aging that starts at the moment of conception, which is what is birth in the Buddha's presentation, right? So from that very moment of conception, aging has occurred and is occurring and continues to occur. And the other one is the physical deterioration of the body that comes with aging, as we know. And I guess, you know, we can look at it in two ways in terms of when we go birth, aging, sickness, death. That sickness can be any time throughout that life. Because I remember when I first heard birth, aging, sickness, death, and I was thinking, why is it not birth, sickness, aging, death? But of course, when you look at aging coming from that moment of conception, it makes sense. It can be any time in that time, but also if should one live to a ripe old age, generally it's going to be some illness or other that's going to take you out, right? So something like that. So, you know, this is and death that comes at the end of the lifetime, actualized by the 10th link of existence. And that commenced with the 11th link. So there we can say in those final 3 links, we've got that whole result right there. And so after describing individually all of the 12 links, the Buddha in the Rice Seedling Sutra continued on and said, from the condition of aging and death, agony, wailing, suffering, unhappiness, and mental disturbances all arise. Like that, merely this enormous heap of suffering arises. So we could say in one way the teaching as presented by the Buddha doesn't end just at that 12th link. It doesn't just end with aging and death. But as the Buddha describes here, continues on with the agony, which is bodily suffering, wailing, which is verbal suffering, and the 3 different forms of mental suffering, of unhappiness, or pervasive suffering, we should say, unhappiness and mental disturbances. And we could say that includes all of the afflictions. So even though it's 2 words, mental disturbance encompasses everything. And so the purpose of this section is to inspire us to want to be free of all this, to see how can I be free of this uncontrolled process of rebirth. And then saying merely this heap of suffering indicates that this process doesn't necessarily entail a substantial self, but it's that natural process of cause and effect. Merely this heap of suffering reminded me of the family motto. My mother researched our whole family emblem. I don't know what the emblem was. I've got a vague memory of that. There was a lion there somewhere. You know, when you get the shield, historically, or at least in the, I don't know, is it a British tradition? No, I've got a British heritage. And the family motto was learn to suffer. And when I first heard that before becoming Buddhist, I was like, thanks, Mum. Great. Dad, whatever. But of course, then when you come to meet the teachings, you can sort of appreciate, not necessarily learn to suffer, but that, like, I mean, isn't the nature of suffering. Here it is presented. Okay. So why this last result isn't presented as a 13th link in samsara is that it doesn't necessarily follow as a result of aging and death, because there are those beings, you know, a Dharma practitioner who can die peacefully without regret, for example, and not propel another cycle. And so here we have, for example, from Milarepa, you know, saying, fearful of the moment of death, I took to the mountains again and again. I meditated on the uncertainty of the time of death. So this is why with that 12 link, we see them both together, because death can come anytime in that aging process from conception onwards. Meditated on the hour of death, capturing the fortress of the deathless, unending nature of mind. Now all fear of death is over and done. So being able to reach that state where there's no fear of death, as Milarepa said, you know, it took meditating over and over again on the uncertainty of the hour of death. Now, we may not have the opportunity to go off into some cave and do that over and over again, but we can do it every single day, you know. We can meditate like this every single day. So having then looked at the individual links and how they're depicted in the Wheel of Life, we then look at the forward and reverse order of the 12 links. So we have been talking about, and indeed we want to know about the 12 links of dependent origination in terms of afflictions, how this cyclic existence continues, but also the purification of that, how to break through, how to cease this cyclic existence. So both the afflicted, the presentation of the afflicted state and of the purification of that, liberation from that, both have a forward and reverse order. So the forward order of the afflictive side emphasizes the origins of suffering. So that's the second noble truth, with ignorance as the condition. And then compositional actions arise. And then with that as a condition, consciousness arises and so forth. Birth as a condition, aging and death arise. So as depicted in that forward direction. And the reverse order is shows the resultant true suffering, which is the first truth, the first noble truth. So aging and death being produced in dependence on birth, and that's produced in dependence on renewed existence and so on, all the way up to compositional actions produced in dependence on ignorance. So we can see this is why it's called the wheel of dependent arising, because they're all dependent arisings. all dependent on each other. And then the purified forward and reverse sequence is the method for liberation, for attaining liberation. So the forward order of the purified side represents the path, the third noble, the true paths, the fourth noble truth. And so we go through by ceasing ignorance. Well, actually, if we cease ignorance and develop the wisdom realizing emptiness, we've ceased the whole thing. But here being presented by ceasing ignorance, compositional action ceases. By ceasing compositional action, the consciousness ceases, and so on, up to aging and death cease. So it's emphasizing the true paths that by ceasing ignorance stop all the propelling of the rest of the links, stops them arising. And then the reverse order of the purified side starts with the 12th link, aging and death, and investigates how to cease that. That's done by ceasing birth. Birth is ceased by ceasing renewed existence, and so on, back to ceasing ignorance. So that emphasizes true cessations. So the third truth, third noble truth, so that all the links can be ceased and nirvana achieved. So we can see how this is an elaboration of the teaching on the four truths in this way. And then it's easy to say the words, but it's like, I still don't know how to do that. Okay, so let's continue on. In the Heart of Dependent Origination by Nagarjuna, the second verse says, the first, eighth, and ninth are afflictions. So now we're looking at different ways that we categorize the 12 links. So the first, eighth, and ninth are afflictions. The second and 10th are karma, and the remaining 7 are dukkha, suffering.
1, 8, and 9 are
Afflictions. Yeah. The second and 10th are karma, and the remaining 7 are suffering, dukkha. So of the 12 links, just saying which ones, ignorance, craving, and clinging are afflictions. And we could say that ignorance and craving are two key paramount points of intervention. Like, of course, you know, the ignorance, if we develop the wisdom realizing emptiness, then we cut the whole root of samsara. But craving, and between craving and clinging or grasping, you know, if we can intervene between the craving and the grasping, which is craving is that desire over and over again, you know, wanting, 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 wanting. And the grasping is where we actually, you know, take hold. So, for example, you know, it's late at night and you've been thinking about that chocolate in the fridge that you said you weren't going to eat. And you've got that craving for that. And then all of a sudden you find the fridge doors open and the chocolate's in your mouth. That's the grasping. It's too late, right? But if we can intervene in those points, this is the point of that in between the craving and the grasping is the room for complete transformation. Okay, so that it's pretty vital that. So the ignorance, craving, and grasping are afflictions. The compositional actions and renewed existence are karma, right? Propels another lifetime. And consciousness, name and form, the 6 sources, contact, feeling, birth, aging, and death are the suffering results. So we'll look at this shortly on that chart. So we can look at the afflictions and the actions as true origins of suffering, and the 7 results as true suffering. So in that way, presenting it as the whole wheel, as in the nature of suffering, whole of samsaric existence. So we can look at it in a broad perspective of continual rebirth in samsara, and each of these groups causes the others in no fixed order. Afflictions cause karma, which brings about suffering, unsatisfactory results. And included in that are the mental aggregates, the afflictions, karmic seeds, and so forth. Again, Nagarjuna says, without these paths mutually causing each other, without a beginning, middle, or end, this wheel of existence turns like a wheel of a firebrand. So, you know, when you turn a wheel of fire, actually, I used to do that in my performance years, fire. What were they? Sticks? Fire twirling, thank you. Fire eating. We'd go into David Jones in Myers, whatever it was, in Melbourne, and buy lighter fluid, because that's the lowest ignition. When you do this, you don't want to burn yourself. And they say, are you going to do fire eating? No. Anyway, I gave it up. My lungs are very happy about that. But, you know, it looks like a ring, you know, an endless ring, or like with the water wheel going around, you know, this sort of constant flow up and down. It's harder to go up, you know, it takes a lot more effort going up. If we think about the inside of this, you know, in the virtue side, it's much easier to cascade down like into the lower realms. Like Lama Atisha said, you know, I never break my Pradamoksha vows. I rarely break my Bodhisattva vows, but the tantric vows I break like falling rain. So it's like that, you know. Of course, to know you're even breaking the vows, you have to know what your vows are and what it is to break them, and whether you're broken by the root and so forth. So we, you know, once we familiarize with that, whatever levels of vows that we have, that we really know the vows and have them in our mental continuum, and then we protect them with caution, with consciousness, with mindfulness, you know, really attending to the mind. So then we look at classifying the 12 links into 4 groups, and this relates to the chart that you, the new chart today, that we have things that are projecting causes that project the next rebirth, that we have projecting results projected by those causes. And then we have actualizing causes which come at the to fruition at death, you know. So it's like the fruition of the projecting causes might be lost already, and the actualizing results, which are actualized by the actualizing causes. So they build some substance to arise. So it's useful as we go through, but then subsequently to keep in mind how these 3 categories, you know, act upon the afflictions, actions, and suffering results, act upon and influence each other. And here it's a very, you know, multiple ways of presenting dependent arising. So it is very complicated. And I guess we, to some extent, we hear about it and get a presentation at an intellectual level, but then it's how do I possibly make sense of this and engage with this in meditation and see how one influences the other. So here in this chart, so number one presents just the mechanism. So we have projecting causes that plant a seed for the projected results. So we could say lifetime A, which is a past life, which preceded this one, which is lifetime B, and that precedes lifetime C, which is some future lifetime. Okay. So we have the projecting causes, ignorance is always the culprit, our compositional action, and the third link, consciousness is divided into two, a causal consciousness and an effect or resultant consciousness. So here it's the causal aspect of that, right? And then the projected results in a future lifetime, or no, if we're taking A as the past lifetime, we can say in this life, the second part of the third link, which is the result or effect consciousness, and then name and form, the six sense spheres, contact, feeling. So that all influenced by the projecting causes. And then what is actualized at the death time, the actualizing causes at the end of this life, craving, grasping, and existence. And that existence is some actualizing karma from some other round of the 12 links, right, that ripens at that point. And then we get the results of birth, aging, and death. Right. So then we'll look at it in the presentation in terms of the number of lifetimes. So it said that this can't play out in one lifetime because we have to have a past life that preceded this one that gave the causes and the projected results of this life, right? So at least we need 2 lifetimes. So here we're looking at lifetime A and lifetime B being subsequent to each other. So we have that same representation of projected causes and projected results, and then the actualizing causes at the end of this life that give rise to the actualizing results, as we've just seen here. So to give an example, so here we see that projecting factors can ripen in the very next life, and actualizing factors always ripen in the very next life, because it's like they've accumulated that substance to be actualized. Okay. So let's say in this life, you create the karma to be born in a God realm in your next life. Right? So this is done by the projecting causes of ignorance. So even we could say, while we're in samsara, even our virtue is pervaded by ignorance. Like we aspire to pure virtue, pure mind all the time, and we make that stronger and stronger. But still, nonetheless, because we're caught up in this cycle, and it's that root ignorance that propels that, there's always that sort of mixed motivation or some craving, some grasping, some any of the links, right? So that ignorance, karma, and causal consciousness. So later in this life, before you die, you create that actualizing causes of craving, grasping, and existence. Of course, the grasping at having an existence is the most likely to propel existence. And that nourishes those seeds and bring them to fruition. So all these 6 causes are functioning throughout this life, this present life, and at the time of death, give rise to the resultant consciousness, to the projected factors of resultant consciousness. Name and form, the 6 sense spheres, contact and feeling. So the projected and actualized effects results are intermingled, so they come together in that same lifetime. So they function at the same time. They're presented separately to look at the ways in which they function, but they actually ripen at the same time. So in this way, all the 12 links are completed in a minimum of 2 lives. And then if we look at 2B on our chart, it presents in terms of over 3 lifetimes, which can have any intervening number of lifetimes in between. Could be eons, could be less than that, in between one life and the next. So we have lifetime A and lifetime B, which proceed without interval. But lifetime A can precede lifetime B at any time. So there's some gap there. So again, we have the same projecting causes from a past life that meet with the actualizing results in this life, lifetime B. And then the projected results and actualized results that arise at the same time. Okay. And so give an example of that. So if I look at my current life as the example, so let's say I didn't project the cause to be reborn in this form in my immediate preceding life. We talk about, you know, a precious human rebirth having the causes of stainless prayers, practice of generosity, pure ethical conduct, usually in the context of having taken vows before whatever levels of vows. But it's not necessarily the immediate preceding life in which that occurred. It could have been 2 lifetimes ago, eons ago, whatever. But that in the between time, those causes for this precious human existence multiplied and became stronger. And so the first of the 3 lives will be the life in which I planted that projecting karma. And then the actualizing causes occur in the lifetime immediately preceding the projected and actualizing results. So that would be my last life. And so, and then coming into this life, so a maximum of 3, all the 12 factors. And then the very next life in which the effects of all of these ripen. And so the intervening lifetimes between however many lifetimes were in between don't factor into this particular set of the 12 links. So we think that, you know, we've got many, many different sets of 12 links going on and on and on and on and on, you know, at different times or simultaneously. So perhaps I'll summarize this with how His Holiness the Dalai Lama asks us to think about it. So, in how many lifetimes do we progress through a cycle of 12? At the fastest, 2 lifetimes. So in the first lifetime, motivated by ignorance, we engage in action and then accumulate that karma. And that potency of that karma is infused with our consciousness. And near the time of death, craving and grasping nourish that karmic seed, that potency, which reaches its fullest potential in the link of existence. That's called existence. And then the next lifetime, we experience the effects of that. Name and form, 6 sense spheres, contact, feeling, birth, aging, and death. Okay, so that's 2 lifetimes. It's the simplest presentation we can have. And at the longest, one cycle takes 3 lifetimes. So in one lifetime, we engage in action motivated by ignorance, keeping in mind that action can be virtuous or non-virtuous, can be beneficial or harmful. And that puts the potency on our consciousness. So here we have the first 3 branches that we've looked at in this chart. And at the end of a later lifetime, with any number of lifetimes in between, craving and grasping nourish that particular seed, that potency. The Buddha used a rice seed. That's why it's called the Rice Seedling Sutra, to demonstrate this. And so that nourishes that particular potency from a past life and leads to the 10th branch of existence. And the very next life, the remaining dependent arisings, name and form, the 6 sense spheres, contact, feeling, birth, aging, and death. Okay. And so the unwanted sufferings of aging and death are produced, as we said, in dependence on birth, produced in dependence on that potentialized level of action called existence, which is produced in dependence on feeling, produced in dependence on contact, produced in dependence on the 6 sense spheres, produced in dependence upon name and form, produced in dependence on consciousness, produced in dependence on action, produced in dependence on ignorance. So this emphasizing the first of the 4 noble truths. And then, as we said, in terms of purification, we look at that ignorance ceases. When ignorance ceases, action ceases. When that ceases, consciousness ceases, and so forth, up to aging and death. Okay. But probably, you know, then we say, how can we take this understanding into understanding more through meditation? How do we take this into meditation? So just some ways in which we can do that. We can follow the great Kadampa Geshe Puchungwa, who was a teacher of Chengawa, so in the 11th century. And so he was known as a great meditator, and he spent his lifetime coupling the meditations on the Lam Rim of the small scope, medium scope, great scope, with the method of meditating on the 12 links of dependent origination. So taking, you know, making the stages of the path, the Lam Rim, a meditation on how we as sentient beings involve ourselves in these 12 factors, creating cyclic existence. So first of all, looking at how meditating on the 12 links as they apply to birth in the lower realms constitute the training for beings in the small scope. So here we can also see that in each of the realms, there's a Buddha, right? And the Buddha is providing what's needed in those realms, you know, in connecting with people in those realms. So for example, in the hungry ghost realm, the Buddha manifesting as offering generosity and giving that sense of practice of generosity, which counteracts that miserly mind. So we have all the graphic understanding of what it is like to experience the suffering of craving and grasping. We use addiction and so forth as examples of that mind that we can take as a mental state right now. And the Buddha offering this hope of, you know, just having that sense of the practice of generosity could cut through this, like could shine a light of a chink in that suffering experience to be able to free ourselves of that. So at the small scope, as is presented in the Lam Rim, the focus is on refraining from the non-virtues, the 10 non-virtues as they're presented, that lead to suffering results in the lower realms. So you meditate on all the experiences in those lower realms. You know, we get the teachings, graphic detail on those, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche would do at the Kopan retreats in the early days, and 3 weeks on the lower realms, and people are like, I'm out of here, I don't want to know about this. And we can see how we might do that on a daily basis. I don't want to know about the suffering in the world. I'm fatigued with hearing about the war in Ukraine or this or that. And I remember Venerable Matthieu Ricard saying at one of the conferences where he was presenting about, the terrible things we humans do to animals and the incredible sufferings of animals. And I just thought, I can't bear to watch. And he said, you've got to, because we've got to understand those levels of suffering, not to feel them ourselves, but to feel the fear of not wanting those sufferings. So the whole purpose is to engender a strong motivation to avoid that experience in the future. And then on that basis, we realize the best antidote to that is taking refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, and adhering to ethical conduct, taking the Pratamoksha vows, the lay vows or the ordained Pratamoksha vows, and keeping pure ethical conduct, which is itself quite a hard task. I mean, that itself, if we just focus on that, it's so often said, people want to, do all this higher level practice, but on the basis of what? Is it on the basis of pure ethical conduct, So in this way, meditating how engaging in non-virtue, leads to lower rebirths, and how disengaging from that frees us from that, and all the practices of the small scope. And you then integrate that to a contemplation of the 12 links. Right? And then we can meditate on the 12 links in relation to the higher realms, rebirth in the upper realms, which is training for intermediate scope beings. We say that the main teaching to engage with in the in the middle scope is that on the Four Truths. We contemplate experience of humans. That's easy for us to do. We know the human experience. But also contemplating the experience of God realms and realize no matter where you are, even you're in the best possible conditions as a human or within the God realms, that there's still in the nature of suffering, you're still subject to various forms of suffering, still conditioned by karma, still conditioned by afflictive states of mind, which are all by nature suffering. So that it pervades all the realms of existence. And then coming to the realization that we can only attain stable, lasting happiness with freedom from this cycle altogether, you know. So here we look at how, again, you know, that engagement in the link, you know, all these links of existence, how it propels our existence. And here as human beings, we can, you know, we've got the minds, you know, the Buddha representing in the human realm, you know, arising, giving all these teachings, all our precious gurus and so forth, because we have an open mind, we have a capacity, we have limitless mind to be able to, in fact, within one lifetime even, free ourselves from this whole cycle of existence. So our focus here in the intermediate scope is, if it's the root ignorance that propels all this, how do I get rid of that? It's not the wisdom realizing emptiness that propels this. That's the key, that's the way out. How do I find that key? And then, fortunately, we have all the methods and we have all the teachings, all the commentaries, all the meditations available to us to be able to put that into practice. So we have that here in the palm of our hands. Okay. And then in the great scope, as Mahayana practitioners, as we are, you know, we say our refuge and bodhicitta prayer. So we apply that same understanding that we have on the basis of the small scope and the intermediate scope to all other beings, you know, other humans, other, you know, animals, all other beings in other realms of existence. We contemplate our connection with them over many lifetimes, you know, our kind mother sentient beings, how that conclusion of, if I've had beginningless lifetimes, I've had beginningless mothers, so all these beings are intimately related to me. They're not something separate out there I don't have to worry about because it's not affecting me right now. And that all of us have been experiencing all these different realms. And it's not like we just go up and up and up. You know, next time I could find myself down there, because they say that, you know, that this is why we emphasize so much, you know, the time of death, how our mind is at that time. It said that I lost track of the numbers, but it was like 1/60 millionth of a nanosecond or something between what could be a human rebirth and an animal rebirth or a lower realm rebirth. You know, it's not like I'm, you know, at that time of death, my mind is stable in this sort of virtuous state, unless I've really stabilized virtue in my mind right now as a human being. You know, if I haven't done that, it's not going to stabilize in my mind at that point. What's going to stabilize in my mind? Fear, pretty much. You know? So, but here we can use our understanding on the basis of all our Dharma teachings, on the basis of all we've read or understood, the examples that we've seen, the biographies that we've read, the ways to meditate on this and so forth, and developing powerful love and compassion. So we have the methods for doing that. You know, we have the 6 cause and effect 1 from Arya Asanga, And from Shantideva, we have exchanging self for others and the whole of the suite of Tonglen practice and so forth that comes along in the concentration chapter. And so on this basis, develop love, develop compassion for others. And as we do, making this motivation, determining to attain Buddhahood swiftly, to be able to benefit all others. So that way, training in the practice of bodhicitta. And we have all of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's, bodhisattvas, bodhisattva attitude, where I'm tightening the belt of discipline. I'm opening the door to the higher realms. I'm closing the door to the lower realms. So everything that we do throughout the day, we're doing it anyway, but we imbue that with a bodhicitta attitude, with that motivation for the benefit of all beings. And that way we keep the mind of bodhicitta, of great compassion, alive, vibrant in our minds all the time, not just when we sit down and do prayers, but all the time, all the time. And in this way, through the practice of bodhicitta, we're applying great energy to overcome ignorance, craving, and grasping, which is a total self-absorption. But in order to produce that great love and compassion, we have to know how they're suffering, how they are trapped. We have to familiarize that. Meditating on dependent origination. So all the, 3 levels of practice, we can meditate like this, combining the Lam Rim with a contemplation on the 12 links. And, it's going to be of great benefit to us, and then hopefully also towards others. Oh, yes, that's right. So we're looking at ways to meditate on this. So another way, as presented by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, is to try and become aware of the whole cycle of existence, the whole evolution of samsara. That ignorance is like a farmer planting a seed of karmic imprints on our consciousness. So it's the first 3 links. And from that arises all the rest of the links. And Rinpoche goes on. While one cycle of dependent arising from the time of the first cause to the full production of a result is occurring, many other cycles of dependent arising, revolving around other contaminated actions, other karmic compositional factors, motivated by ignorance, are occurring at the same time. And then Rinpoche uses this example. This is like committing a crime, being put in jail, and committing more crimes while in jail. It does happen. I can tell you from working with people in prison, it happens. So you're already in jail and you're doing more crimes. You haven't learnt the lesson. So until that ignorance is removed, it's endless and there doesn't seem to be a way out. And that's why we use this analogy of samsara being like a prison. As Rinpoche says, those in the physical prison know they're in the physical prison. The rest of us are in a mental prison, where we're all in a mental prison. But a lot of the time we don't realize it. We, as it says in the Lama Chöpa, we take this existence as a pleasure grove, as a park, as my source of pleasure, my life, So it's a prison, and no matter what we do, even engaging in virtue, it can only have limited effects in a samsaric existence because it's pervaded by the root ignorance. So, as Rinpoche says, there's never any true happiness anywhere to be found. And this is what the Buddha said. We're pervaded by this dissatisfaction, this sense of discontent. It's never truly lasting. The only way out is to put the key in the lock of the prison door, the wisdom realizing the true nature of reality, which has the power to eliminate ignorance. So knowing that we have so many different seeds on our mind stream, just waiting for that opportunity to ripen, and so many cycles dependent of origination, we have to be really, really careful to avoid harmful actions, harmful speech, careless actions. And the more we do it, we can bring a small result, we can bring a great result, great change. Especially like taking that step as early as possible in a negative state, a delusion arising in the mind. And once the causes are established, then we have at our fingertips, all these purification practices that we need to do in relation to any of the particular links. So we can do it in relation to the whole thing, or we can do in relation to particular links, my craving mind, my grasping mind. And so we do this, we can do this throughout, we need to do this throughout the whole of our lives. So another analogy here. Imagine being aware that part of your garden, you have the seed of a poisonous plant. We don't want poisonous plants in our garden, right? So you don't go around watering it, fertilizing it, applying it, weeding around it and so forth, because you know that's going to encourage the growth of your poisonous plant, isn't it? In another part of your garden, you have a mango seed, and you're really looking forward to having a crop of mangoes. Thank you very much. So you spend a lot of time watering, putting effort in, fertilizer, weeding, doing anything you can to ensure the growth. So it's the same strategy we apply to our mind, not giving attention to those, identifying, not giving attention, not letting those seeds of destructive states of mind fester and grow in our mind. Sometimes it can be by, or probably oftentimes, that we're complaining about someone or something, and we go over and over and over and over, and we realize I'm just reinforcing, I'm making this concrete, this whole story. It's like delete, get rid of it. That is dangerous to our mind. And then we tell everyone about it and blah, 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 blah. And then it has even greater consequences. So that we have to realize as soon as possible, as soon as it disturbs our mind stream, shine the light of awareness and say, not just the light of awareness, but our understanding of karma, understanding how the links work. And I can't afford this. I can't afford to go there. So then we engage in those practices, all our efforts to develop love, develop compassion, to abandon engaging in non-virtue as we do, killing, stealing, and so forth. Engaging more in our spiritual practices, our prostrations, our circumambulations, our mantra recitation, but also the practices of the perfections in our day-to-day life, of practice of generosity, of patience with those who rub us up the wrong way, patience with our own Dharma practice, giving love, giving compassion, look at the opportunities. So when we decide to abandon killing, it leaves, particularly when we take a vow, it leaves an imprint, a substance on our mind stream that we can't see, but the holy beings can see. And then if we protect that, it remains on our mind stream, and even we're not thinking about not killing or so forth, even we're asleep, it's still manifesting more and more good karma, more and more virtue along the way to ripen more and more virtue in our mind stream. And not only that, if on top of that, we're not just refrain from killing, but we engage in saving lives. However, to whatever level, you know, don't tread on the ants. Don't flush them down the sink. Whatever, you know, it takes more mindfulness because they're so teeny tiny, you can hardly see them. So bringing that more and more mindfulness. So in this way, we want to encourage the states of mind that only bring virtuous results. And this makes our mind stronger. Why? Because it's more in sync with reality. It's more getting in touch with our own innate qualities, our own Buddha nature. So this we do through our whole life, but especially important at death time. You know, it would be very dangerous if we say, oh yes, I've led a virtuous life, but right at the time of death, relinquish that, you know, even your whole life, you consciously generated thoughts and encouraging virtuous seeds, but then you haven't familiarized, say, with the death process enough to, like Milarepa, the hour of death, the uncertainty of the hour of death and overcoming that fear. So we have to sort of work at it from multiple angles, isn't it? Okay. I think that's the end of what I wanted to say. Questions, comments, observations? How this understanding of, to whatever level of understanding of the 12 links of dependent arising has benefited you, benefits you? Then,
over the years, I've sort of thought I understood it at a superficial level, but at a deeper level, I understand it. So I've found it very helpful.
Yeah.
Especially in the first 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah.
It's funny because I can see now it's a crazy thought, but for years and years, I had the idea how on earth can samsara, which I think is life,
Yes.
arise, which is a material thing. How could it arise from a non-material thing?
Yes.
Like ignorance.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, it's not, that's the wrong way to think.
Samsara is a mental state and all our, yeah.
It's the wrong way to think about it. I see that.
Yeah. I think we do, because we say wheel of life and we think, oh, this life, you know, or however many, even we think many lifetimes, you know, whereas what we're talking about is different mental states.
But the ignorance, this life actually comes from the other.
Yes.
And you also happen to it.
Yes, through your mind entering that at that point,
yep,
makes that life. Yeah. 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 So that's, as you said, you know, we get because it can be, you know, we can look at it and, oh, this is quite dry and intellectual and so forth, especially when you look at the different lifetimes and how this one connects with that. And your head goes, oh, hang on a minute, I haven't quite got that. And this is why it does take actually looking at ways to meditate on it, to make it meaningful to ourselves, you know. So that's good. A few more dots connected.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right.
Wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
The idea of virtue being mixed with ignorance.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate
On that, maybe with an example.
Okay, so I guess an example when we're just talking about ignorance. Okay, let me start. Okay, so our existence here as a samsaric existence, in other words, in the nature of suffering, and that pervades whichever realm we find ourselves in, from the lowest hells up to the top God realms. There's still, you might say there's less suffering in the God realms because their bodies are refined and they don't have the suffering of the form aggregate, right? But still, there's that pervasive suffering. You're protecting what you've got or whatever. And yes, when we engage in virtue, the more powerful our motivation, the more virtuous it is. But it's never 100% because we've got this underlying ignorance, which is a grasping at a hereditary existent self. So even though I might be engaging in virtue, I might come to the point, oh, isn't samsara over yet? I've been so virtuous because, you know, I've been so virtuous. I'm not, that's exaggerating. But we have those sorts of thoughts, you know. Why isn't this making an immediate difference right now? I want to see the result. The Buddha said, well, the results come in future lifetimes. And so this ignorance, until we've got a direct perceptual realization of emptiness, then our whole perspective completely changes. That we see things that we cannot see right now at a very subtle level. So yes, I'm engaging in virtue, but at the same time, I'm giving money to a charity or to someone, and that may be completely from pure virtue, but I've still got some story attached, or not necessarily pride, because I do it anonymously, you know. And in fact, I always find doing it anonymously is the best way to overcome any sense of manifest pride. But that's, you know, up to each individual. But yeah, it's always like, it's never quite 100% pure, because this ignorant mind that we're not 100% in sync with reality as it is. You know, this book is called Awakening from the Daydream. It's calling the Wheel of Life a daydream, samsara a daydream. Lama Zopa says hallucination. There's still some element of us elaborating on top of what's there, what isn't there, and that we need to unpack. And particularly what isn't there is this inherent existence self, that we're propelled into existence through this innate self-grasping. And so that's going to pervade all our experience. I remember the first, I don't know if it was the first time, but I felt it like it was the first time that I presented a kata to Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And I had this motivation, I just want one moment of pure mind in front of the Lama. But it's like, I want pure, you know, it just wasn't happening, right? This trying to force something onto the situation. You can say the motivation is good, absolutely, and keep working at it, keep working at it. And the more we keep working at it, the more we build up that habit of virtue, the more we build up the strength of that, the power of that. And then that becomes natural to us, right? So it takes a lot of practice. I mean, just relax on it's pervaded with ignorance, because it's too subtle for us at times to see. Sometimes it's really manifest and sometimes it's not. And just accept that that is how it is. This is as pure as I can get it. And hey, I'm doing my best.
Can I ask that a question?
Yes.
Yeah, when you were talking then, I was thinking about whether, in part, holding to some idea of an outcome that I want.
Oh, yes, definitely holding to an idea of an outcome that I want, or even holding to some philosophical view or so forth, that, you know, we can be, yes, definitely. That is definitely a grasping mind, isn't it? Good. It's good to think up our own examples, and like with this whole wheel of life, think up our own examples, even draw your own wheel of life, just like this one. That has meaning for you. That is something that you would like to take into meditation, right? Anything else?
When you first started talking about how to take it into meditation, you mentioned the person's name before you went on to talk about how it was. So what is it?
Puchungma.
How do you spell that?
Puchunga, I think.
Thank you.
The compositional actions.
Yeah.
It says that there are 5 factors, and one of them is intention. So I'm wondering.
Yes, when we look at intention, attention, the 5 omnipresent factors that we have that bring our mind to any action that we engage in. And again, we're not aware of those. So we can take something like mindfulness, and mindfulness itself can be virtuous or non-virtuous or neither, you know, can be. So of course we talk about it in our practices in terms of virtue, cultivating on the, you know, be mindful and so forth. But as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, I can also go, oh, I'm mindfully picking up the knife, I'm mindfully stabbing someone, you know, and so forth. So we have different factors of the mind that play into that.
There is a negative intention
Yes.
that propels me towards a certain outcome. Does the action of regret negate that to some extent?
Well, depending on the power of regret. So this is where, when we talk about the purification practices with the 4 opponent powers, that we have reliance, we take refuge, and the reliance also is that's the refuge side. The bodhicitta side is in reliance on other beings, because it's in relation to them we probably mostly create all these negative actions, thoughts, speech, so forth. And so we've got to, you know, transform that. So they're the 2 aspects of reliance. And then we have regret. This is why we decided to do this practice in the first place. So I've got regret for that action. And it said, the stronger the regret is the stronger the purification. So whether it completely negates it or not is up to us. It depends on the frequency, the strength of that, the heaviness of the object in relation to which we've engaged in that. There's so many different factors that come into play. But the stronger that we do that, and the more immediately we do it before it festers and grows in our mind stream. Again, this is why Lama Atisha would say, you know, as soon as he saw that negativity arising in the mind before it came out in speech and action, he'd be there doing purification practice, Vajrasattva, in fact. I mean, I'm sure he did other things as well, but he's known for Vajrasattva practice. So, and then the remedy such that whether, I mean, anything basically, any virtuous practice could be, but classically we look at prostrations, Vajrasattva practice, water bowl offerings, mandala offerings, or, you know, different ways of purification practice. And then the power of restraint, at making a pledge, making a promise not to do that again, if we can really confidently keep that, or at least to the end of this practice or the next second, or, you know, be realistic. And that way we're chipping away at that capacity to engage in that again. Right. So we're just sort of weakening that negativity. As soon as we shine the light of awareness on that and even recognize it, we're already, you know, weakened that that mental state that led into that unskillful action. Okay, so I wanted to just leave a little bit of time to mention that these two topics on the 12 links and on the 4 truths are, anyway, the presentation on this comes from this course that's being piloted at the moment, Exploring Buddhism, being piloted within FPMT. It's a sort of, in one way, it's entree into the basic program, but at least in the gap between discovering Buddhism and basic program, so more sort of in between, in that space in between. And this Exploring Buddhism course has been piloted since the second half of last year, at least, in Jamyang in London, in West Coast US, East Coast US, and since the beginning of this year at Vajrayana Institute. So moving forward for our Friday mornings, I've proposed that we piloted here, having already done this. Basically, we've covered one of the modules, which is the truths, in exploring the truths. So the whole course is called Exploring Buddhism, and then each subject that comes along is exploring something. So that's why it'd be good to get feedback, because FPMT is looking at the pilots to see, have we hit the right mark, or it's being presented in many different ways as well. So it's good to have a taste of the different ways it's presented. So any sort of feedback that would help with that is great. So the topics, exploring mind is the first one. And that looks at both from a sort of, from Western mind scientists, neuroscience, physics, and so forth, as well as from the Buddha's presentation. So it's quite, I find that quite exciting. And we see that, you know, this is, the Dalai Lama has been really encouraging that at the monasteries, you know, where our Geshis train and so forth, that they really develop more understanding on Western presentation or modern mind science presentation on the understanding of the mind and all those mind and life dialogues His Holiness had. So that's been incorporated into the curriculum for, you know, Sarah J Monastery and so forth. It's been for some time. So that's that first one. Then exploring meditation, exploring the truths, which we've covered that material, exploring the path, mind training, and the conditions for realizations. So they're the topics so far. Takes a couple of years to go through, but I'm just saying, I think I would like to proceed in this manner, and I hope everyone's on board with that, to like take that, continue to take that material and present it, and then give feedback along the way about the content or about the, well, as I said, it's been presented in different ways. So I think at this point, because it is a pilot, it's quite flexible in terms of how it can be delivered and so forth. And there are resources also that come along with it. So people, I'm just putting that out there. I just wanted to mention that from May, we'd be looking at offering it under that umbrella of Exploring Buddhism. Okay. Any questions about that? Comments about that?
I'm only doing the first module of the Discovering Buddhism. I'm still going on.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't say no to anybody. No, if you're finding it helpful, then that's the key. Yeah. So there's no like stipulated prerequisite, must have completed Discovering Buddhism or anything like that, because then the numbers would go down. Okay. All right. So if you want to have further discussion about that, just get in touch with me, or if you want to give any feedback, please do. Okay. So, oh, and then announcements. Tara Puja tomorrow afternoon, 2 o'clock. Sunday morning, meditation and discovering Buddhism. And then next Saturday, Friday, Saturday, we have the Shamatha Vipassana retreat. Yes, it's Easter, and like many centres, we're taking the opportunity to have an Easter retreat, a mini Easter retreat. So there's still Easter Sunday, Monday to go. So if you're interested in that, okay.
Is there a puja on Monday night as well?
Yes, then there's Guru Puja Sog on Monday evening. Thank you. Okay, so page 17, we'll dedicate. Gewadi no do da lama sange trukyone drowa chikyang mahalopa de sahala Gopa Shu Jancho Sencho Grimpo She Makye Panam Ge Kruji Ke Panyam Pa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Pelwa Shu. Long Life Prayers, page 19. Chikten kam dipende malupa gan le jungwe sampel yijino kadrin sorme tenzin gyat sola so dip so tu so page 22. Tu so shang xin zhang gun yao wei ten xin yong pao wei kon so du po se Chuk sum ko we le mon tu tu pa da su du shi gun du ja tien shuk. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Oh, thank you.